everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on metaverse in education. We have our one famous speaker, Mr. Rob, Mr. David Smith, and Mr. Jason. First, I would like to give chance Mr. Rob.
Thank you. So today we're talking about the metaverse in education, and the metaverse has two predominant uses right now. One is as a digital twin of the real world used for management and simulation, and the other is for entertainment, a place to go. It's defined by imagination and not reality, and there may be no link to the real world. And they're two events are not mutually exclusive. You could certainly have a situation where you could intersperse real and imaginary stuff, both for entertainment and for business. For instance, you might mock up a skyscraper in a otherwise realistic and digital twinned metaverse instance, and just to show how it would interact with the other buildings and structures throughout the day. We've had a number of instances, for instance, where large glass buildings have generated so much heat they've melted things in the adjoining buildings and the cars in the street. So being able to do that in simulation is pretty handy. And then with regard to the imagination side, mostly it's surrounding gaming, on pure imagination gaming, and experiencing things that you probably could not experience in the real world, where you can kind of throw aside physics. Now in education, this gives you an unusual opportunity to teach by showing. We know that we learn better if we engage the student in the activity. And with the metaverse, if you're talking about something, you can show it at the same time and drill down into detail. Unlike you could certainly freeze a film, but now you could freeze in the metaverse and completely walk through a scene. For instance, if you're talking about the Civil War and a particular battle, or you were going back in time and looking at a mock-up of the Library of Alexandria, you could take the students through it and talk to them a little bit about what might have been inside, how it was constructed, how it failed, and some of the socio-dynamics that resulted in the collapse of that particular form of that particular civilization. And then in terms of engineering with the metaverse, a lot of times students get into trouble when they're doing things in real life. And with the metaverse, if you build an unsafe structure, whatever, and it fails, nobody's hurt. And so you can do lots and lots of simulation. You can let kids do things that are incredibly dangerous. In the real world, you can do them in the metaverse, and they're comparatively safe. So in the end, the advantage of the metaverse is the ability to actually blend reality and imagination to allow students to experience things that otherwise may not be able to experience because of distance, because they no longer exist anymore, or because they only exist in the imaginations of science fiction writers, the professor, or others that have created that environment. And so it provides a great way to teach kids creativity. It provides a great way to have them experience history, and it provides them with a fabulous way for them to be able to experiment and learn by doing far more safely than they would if they had to do things in the real world. And that's my opening. I'll pass over to David.
Rob, thank you so much. It looks like Sharif is still having internet problems with us. The metaverse really has appeared at a very interesting time. You know, the whole COVID pandemic forced humanity to rethink how we learn, how we teach, and has overnight changed education, I believe, for quite a while as we look at it. You know, as Rob said, the metaverse is a 3D digital space mixed with the real world and the virtual world. And many of us see that as the environments around it mature, it has great potential for the future of education. And really look at how it can be defined. And there are beginning to be multiple frameworks put in place for education in the metaverse. And it's these frameworks that will really be one of the things which will accelerate the metaverse in education, because you really need to see ways to do education at the mass rather than just pilot usage to be really application. In the metaverse, there are four uh, leading frameworks that are coming into place around education. And one of them is blended learning, one is language learning, one is inclusive education, the other is competency-based education. And these are good for both general education and also for corporate training and other types of education too. Many of you who listen to this program know I speak often about we're in a time of lifelong learning, and that these topics, as we begin to see them expanding in the metaverse, are a great way to implement that tend towards the lifelong education. Because we know that early in the latter part of the last century, in what we call the digital revolution back then, started developing the tools of the digitalization of moving things from physical to digital mode. We begin to see uh, communications and being connected really come up. And in a relative short period of time, humanity went from using mechanical and analog to digital. And these technology advances has really what made the metaverse for education possible. And even Facebook's rebranding and Zuckerberg's speech about the next generation of the internet, he focused on education about a lot of that, and we will see how it can go forward. And there's many nuances to it as we go for it. We're seeing a lot of video games begin to move to the metaverse, and that's going to change how we're going to set it up for education, in particularly ways to uh, make it a lot more than what we see today in Microsoft Zoom or uh, any type, I mean, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any type of video conferencing that has been used recently in education become more engaging and to become a more lifelike on-room classroom. I've seen several develop ones where they actually create the school itself in the metaverse, and you can walk through the school, you can interact with other people with your avatar. And so it's beginning to go not just uh, a lecture to you, but actually trying to begin to promote what you traditionally see in a brick and mortar classroom. So, Sharif, I think that's a good interest start, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that I'd like to start by drawing a distinction between simulation and metaverse, in that there's a lot that can be provided in the way of simulation, and that metaverse defines itself sort of by having that continuous login and larger network effect. And, as it pertains to education, I think I would suggest that education is among the greatest of luxuries. And the love for learning comes from the experience of doing that among peers. I think that there's a part to education that is maybe not appreciated as a luxury. It's treated as more like an onerous burden that has like an accomplishment or something, and that it's both, right? There's a balance, but that I'd say one of the main distractions from education, in my experience, like going through school, was social media, where people will spend, I can confess to spending my time on social media when I could have been spending it studying, for example. And that further to that, even the profession of social media professional for the domain of marketing, it was sort of laughed at as a profession at first. But people were drawn to that profession because they enjoyed spending their time on social media, just that much. That blending the world of work and social interaction is a powerful thing. And so I think that on the note of education, it's important to note what it is, properly speaking, and why people love it, and that education is the way out. education is the way out. That's what it translates to. It refers to an empowerment. It refers to a capacity for solving problems. And that it's a very, I guess, exciting and also relieving feeling to learn how to solve problems. And that there, to agree with some of the earlier points, I'd say that there are a lot of abstracts in the world of education that are it is helpful to have a visual aid. It is very helpful to have a good visual aid to help sort of provide that abstract without it being a huge struggle. Although at the same time, the balancing side of that is that it can be a little bit much. What's possible with education in the metaverse might be a little bit more than the temptation is there, right? To make it more elaborate than it needs to be for a person to really free their mind properly like that. So I guess I'll offer those as introduction comments for now.
Thank you. Now I request Madam Viva. She is doing excellent job. Especially we are observing her many good video in social media, and she is educating people for climate change. And I request all of our audience, please observe Madam Viva's different video. It may help to improve our community, and in the emerging economy, we are also sharing your content. So how Metaverse can be helpful for the education, or do you want to utilize the Metaverse for your training and advocacy program?
Yes, I do. I don't know a lot about it, but I think that, using the metaverse also needs some balance with some analog tools as well, too. So I just want to quickly mention that people can buy all kinds of used textbooks and have that within their metaverse studio available so that they can take breaks with textbooks on subjects that are of interest to them that will help supplement and also give you a bit of a break from the blue light overload that you can get from all that exposure online. And so very helpful. I encourage people to look up used books, used textbooks, and add that to their repertoire so they have an interesting mix. It's very stimulating. And I'm here to learn a little bit more about what you're going to say, and I'll offer some comments on the second round. Yes, we do offer short seminars online, and so that's our initial contribution to the metaverse. And we hope to have a fairly large archive of that available for people to enjoy. So thanks a lot, Sharif. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Madam Viva. Professor David Smith, after the show, we have very, very special meeting with you and Viva, because World Talent Economy Forum fully supporting reduction tech, and because country like Bangladesh, we are heavily affected by the climate change. Recently, we finished our conference with Dhaka University, especially on the sustainability. Our Honorable Prime Minister Chief Advisor, Mr. Salman F. Rahman, and all of the scholars, they introduced 72 projects in this conference, and reduction tech definitely very, very important project. Country like Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Maldives, and this kind of countries. So all of your support, especially our World Talent Economy Forum Board of Advisor, Mr. Rob Enderley, Mr. David Smith, and Mr. Jason, I want to invite you in our boards. All of your support is important for reduction tech and for emerging economy. Professor Rob, when we're discussing about education is a major problem. World Talent Economy Forum trying to solve this problem through all of your contributions. Internet is a major challenge. How we can solve internet problems and execute this metaverse, or do they have any kind of plan like Facebook Metaverse has any plan to help this emerging economy to solve this critical problem?
Well, Facebook had a plan to connect people to the internet. I mean, let's not mix up the metaverse and the internet. So the metaverse is a virtual rendering of a place that either exists or doesn't exist, and it can be a blend of the two. Facebook did have a number of initiatives to try to spread the internet. the most fascinating and probably stupid was low altitude, always flying aircraft. A bunch of us did the math when they were talking about that. And if when done, they would have had an air force that was larger than China, US, and Russia combined, and substantially so. And how the heck they ever planned to maintain that air force was I think beyond anybody. I mean, it sounded really good until you got to the numbers, and there was just no way that such a thing was going to be sustainable. And that was before you even took into account the kind of trouble you'd have with air traffic management, with that many aircraft in the air all the time. We are going to have issues with drone delivery, but this would have just been insane. And so those efforts stopped. Now it really looks like the Starlink approach, satellite-based internet distribution, is probably the best way to cover an emerging environment where laying wire and putting up towers may not be economically feasible. You can do things with satellite that you can't really do on the ground. And even though we've done a pretty decent job with regard to repeaters, trying to maintain bandwidth and reliability when the regions themselves may be under conflict, and the structures can be attacked and taken down for their raw materials, has just proven to be problematic. So satellite looks to be, with Starlink, the golden child at the moment, but there are other people spinning up similar technologies, and have been for a while, to address the same problem. But it does look like satellite internet is probably the way to provide a reliable form of internet. Now back to education and the metaverse. Both Jason and David brought up some interesting things I'd like to drill down on a little bit. One is this idea of language. One of the best ways to learn another language is through immersion. To actually immerse yourself in the culture, in the language that you're going to learn. And the metaverse provides such a construct. You don't need to use by the way, a VR headset to explore the metaverse, but when you have it on, it isolates you. And when you're trying to learn something through immersion, isolation is a good thing, because if any distraction spoils the immersion. You've got to be surrounded by the language, by the visual elements of the language. And at least that's proven to be a relatively rapid way to teach somebody a new language, and the metaverse could be excellent for that. In terms of exploring the business world, one of the things education fails students in is really getting them used to their life post-education. They're going to work in a cubicle. They're going, depending what it is. They may have no windows. It's not going to be anything like the school they were in, I guess is what I'm pointing. And we've got a pretty big problem right now where kids are coming out of school and they're hitting the workforce and they're bouncing. Because they have no understanding of what they're going to be put through. They haven't really learned good behavioral skills, which can cause them to get fired or just burned out. They haven't learned good life skills, and they have no idea what living in a cubicle farm is going to be like. And you can show them that. I mean, you could really show them. I mean, here's the path you're on. Here's what your job's going to look like, and you can plop them right down into that environment without disturbing a company. Because we used to do things where you'd have where you take a class and you take it into the company and you take a tour, but you really didn't get a sense of what's going on, and it's disruptive to the company when it happens. With the metaverse, you can do that without disrupting the company, and the kids can stay there all day if they want. I mean, and just watch how people interact, and in some cases interact and actually and work in a simulated job that showcases to them in great depth what their lives can be like post-education. And they make a decision early on: was this the life you want to have? And I think a lot of students would change their career path early on if they saw what their exit is likely to look at. A lot of the kids are coming through with degrees that aren't going to be marketable at the back end, and even if they are marketable, it's going to result in a set of tasks that they aren't going to enjoy in a company that they probably don't want to be in. And so it's this getting around this education by rote, that it just it's all automatic until you come out and become an adult. And then you're suddenly thrown to the wolves, allowing the kids a more gradual ramp into real life, and showing them what their life would be and helping them prepare for it. Look for the skills they don't have. Look for the career path that gets them to doing things that they like doing, as opposed to things they don't like doing, and thereby motivating them to a better future. I know in my own case, I started off in college and I dropped out initially because I just didn't see much point. And then I went to work in the company I was working for, fired every single manager that didn't have a degree, and that motivated me to go back and get serious. And then I picked up 3 degrees. But it required me to see that degree was going to protect my future job as opposed to not. Now, right now, there's a big push to actually not go in and get degrees. Here in the United States, a great deal of effort is going in to identify people that don't necessarily have degrees, but have the right personal traits that show maturity, that show that they're willing to learn, and putting them in jobs. That the first time I saw this was out of Israel, and and Intel's plant in Israel, and that process is spread company wide, but it's spread well outside of Intel now. We've now got large government facilities that are specifically saying you don't need a degree for a particular job as long as you've got experience. And so gaining that experience becomes another way to advance, and recognizing that early on, that maybe for whatever you're trying to do, the degree isn't as important as just getting out there and starting to do it. But in all cases, it provides an avenue and a capability that education hasn't had to put the student in the world which they will eventually emerge, and let them gradually become acclimated to it, as opposed to just throwing them out into the real world and like a bucket full of ice water, suddenly discovering the world isn't anything like they expected it to be, and expecting them to suddenly become mature when they weren't forced to be mature ahead of time. So through simulation, you can do a lot of things. Our military uses this stuff really heavily in terms of teaching. Law enforcement does as well, teaching what can happen, because in both cases, you're not always fighting. Most of what you're doing is sitting and waiting, and then suddenly something pops up, and you want all that muscle memory to kick in and the decisions to be the right ones. But if those decisions only may occur once in your lifetime, but they're going to define your life going forward, then doing simulations that allow you to experience those kinds of situations ahead of time prepares you for those eventual events. Help that might save your life, might save your job, certainly would save your sanity. So in the end, the metaverse provides an unprecedented way to get people ready for the world they're going to experience through simulation in a relatively safe fashion, because you're living in the simulation. You're not living in the real world. So bullets don't hurt, and of course that changes as soon as you leave. And I'll pass over to David.
All right, thank you. You made some very profound points there, and ones which I think are important for the listeners, in that there's multiple ways you can experience education in the multiverse. And I agree with you that a fully immersive glasses are some of the best way to do it. But the other ones that are really fascinating to me, and I've been playing with some of the companies here in Texas, and actually with some of the entries into the Innovation Awards at South by Southwest, which starts this week in Austin, is the ones where they include tactical support. I loved looking at a metaverse experience in education, where through the immersiveness of the glasses and gloves on your hands, you actually repaired a jet engine in the metaverse, and were able to follow the education process step by step as you did that. So you're seeing all different type of advances in it, and we're seeing some places where there might be some disruptive influences in the metaverse going to education. And part of it, what we said before, is there's a transition of content and environments into a digital process. And while I personally believe books are important, it's the new era that the metaverse is embracing is a paradigm shift that moves from a hybrid or a digital in-person process, like what we see with Zoom, into a fully immersive one, where you are interacting in a virtual environment with everyone there. And it's improving the quality of learning in many instances, because you have access through the metaverse to more master teachers and people who are there, and you're seeing increased personalization. And we're seeing more and more places where, because of this personalization, you can match the student's pace of learning. in their style of learning, whether they're a visual learning, a tactical learner, or whatever. We're seeing that. And even with what we're seeing with the chat GPT and other AI approaches, when that's combined with the metaverse, it's really going to help us redefine the learning process in both education and in training. And, you know, we already see that each month in video gaming and others, we're seeing over 200 million unique users a month. And we're seeing that the people are embracing this type of immersing digital environment. And we still need to set up internet safety rules. We need to set up content rules and privacy rules, but it's taking off on its own even without many of those in place. And the other thing that I love about it is you've heard me say in other broadcasts that education has not changed much from the time of Socrates. Well, this is going to really make changes in the education process, particularly when we see that the metaverse so lends itself to gamification and to being a more of a hands-on environment through gamification, that we learn more from what we see, hear, and do than just what we see and hear. So you're seeing that. And you know, as the digital divides shorten, as hardware gaps close and stuff, we're going to see um, through the digital metaverse an opportunity to expand into more markets, to reach a greater number of students, and to really uh, look at how to address the digital and generational divide in the metaverse. And because of the ability to do mass personalization in the metaverse, the education can begin to crease not just the digital divide, but the generational divides too. And it will really go a long ways to helping us. And we're going to see that the metaverse education will really transform the role of the student and the teacher. And they are really, for example, the student becomes no longer just someone who receives content, but they are one who actively participates with it. In gamifications things, they might uh, take a leading role in that. And so the teacher is both a teacher, but they also will have to adapt to the role of a facilitator in education in the metaverse. So this is going to change a lot in the way you see it. And teachers are going to have to understand much more the concepts behind social and emotional learning and understand some of the psychological effects that augmented reality and fully immersive digital environments have on behavior. And it will uh, really set ways to, I believe, improve some of the education process. Uh, but again, one of the major places is we still need to set standards. And several of the major technology companies have made strong commitments to technology. And it really has not become clear if they are using some of their own proprietary standards or if they're trying to set open standards. We still need to look at the regulatory side of this. If I get a degree in high school in the metaverse, how will that transfer if I want to go to a bricks and mortar college? How will certifications I learn there transfer? And you know, this world of the metaverse, this world of the alternative virtual reality, really can add value to the learning process of the future. And it's one of them which I'm very excited about. So, Sharif, I hope these types of trying to stage it and position it are useful for your show today.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you. You know, where to build on all of that? There are a lot of topics laid out. I think I'd go to start with the hardware piece because the internet itself, access to it still actually has a lot more people to bring online. And no secret about it, Facebook most definitely built physical infrastructure in order for people to access the internet in the first place, for the express purpose of being able to access Facebook. And they're a little bit maybe extractive of that, but that's a critique of Facebook that I'll put to the side. For whether or not it was like, yeah, here's the internet, but then you can only use it for Facebook, sort of. You know, it was a little heavy-handed, and guess what? They're doing it for Metaverse too. The reason I mention it just like that is because they were a little heavy-handed with Metaverse treatment, I think, trying to buy up all the hardware providers for headsets, right? Oculus Rift and all the rest of it. That was the big investment that Facebook sort of made in the past while, and with the change to Meta and all of the companies involved, they are hardware providers, probably as much or more than software providers. And accessing the internet in the first place is really the first step. So little known fact, about 3 to 5% of internet traffic is going through satellites. And that satellites actually depend on ground infrastructure, cabling on the ground and towers from the ground in order to deliver information to devices on the ground. And that the satellites are just like one wire. It's like replacing something like what intercontinental cables do instead. And the cables are a problem because of sharks. Always will be. Satellites are cheaper than cables. Probably, I agree. I agree with that. So as far as tier 1 infrastructure goes, satellites are, I love it. I think it's awesome. You know, and having international cooperation on satellites is just as important as in the ocean, right? Other little known fact, international law pertains to the ocean as it does to outer space. It's the same sort of idea in the domain of law in terms of international cooperation. And for the internet itself, right? It's an internationally governed network of networks. And so reaching everybody and bringing people on with access, with safe access to information, with fair access to information, I would think that if Metaverse helps, then I wouldn't put the cart before the horse, right? Like, this is just it, is that delivering that by itself would be a thing that would be awesome for Metaverse. But I'll digress and just sort of agree with what you were saying with the satellites instead of planes and other stuff. Oh, actually, I should mention 5G, short range 5G. It can be safer than the fourth generation, right? As you know, the fourth generation is a whole wide radius, and the fifth generation is more of a beam. And that, just don't make a mistake of trying to upgrade 5G routers on the 4G sort of system. Anyways, full immersion learning is all about necessity. You know, like, I'm going to stitch these thoughts together on the theme of necessity being the mother of all invention, and that when you're traveling and you have to find your way around, then you have to learn the language, and your subconscious mind is aware of the fact that you don't have a choice about this. You have to figure it out. So you do, and you really accelerate that learning process. And whether or not you can recreate that in a safe environment like Metaverse that you can just sort of unplug from, I'm not sure about. Unless it's part of a game, unless the game is the linguistic game, and that you can't, in order to solve the game, you have to figure out what's happening with the language. And also with full immersion learning, you get the non-dictionary dialectic, right? What you might call like the urban dictionary, so to speak, which is how people actually hold conversation. And so it's a social experience of learning with that. I think that I wanted to agree with David's point about customization, because classrooms are limited on their ability to make like a different textbook for the class, or that the whole class is going at the same pace as everybody else, and there's one teacher teaching everybody at the same pace. And that I think that that's a lot slower than, I think that's what kind of makes it feel like a slog, for historically speaking. I was back and forth on whether to critique Rob's description or to agree with it, but I think I'm going to bit of both. The school system, people should know, was designed expressly for industrial training. You know, like the scheduled hours and the big bell chime. It's supposed to routinize people to make them be able to work in factories. Like that was actually the design point. But the evolution, the necessary evolution of the school system happened way slower than the industrial transition. So we're in a new industrial phase with an education system that was sort of built for training for a former industrial phase. And it's a mismatch, for sure. I mean, there are shop classes that are designed to give people an experience of how to do a trade. And depending on what your profession might be, if you are imagining that, then I think there are some, depends on what school you go to. It always depends. Who knows what? You can't say everything for everybody, but yeah, I think that for people who are going to be using home offices or working remotely, that doing education remotely makes a world of sense. I also wanted to add on that schools are seen sometimes as essential for child care services, for the time for parents to have time for their professions. And there's another cynical like side joke about how video games are like the electronic babysitter for parents, and they need to occupy their kids for 30 minutes. It's like, here you go watch TV or something. And the kids will do that for 30 minutes or for however long. And well, not for however long, but for a while. And that school is, I think that I would keep an eye on that, how they relate to each other and how they compare to each other. Because remote learning during the COVID pandemic for people who had to try learning from home was a bit of a difficult experience, I think. And largely because it wasn't an electronic babysitter function. It wasn't, you could just plug in and let the kid have the teacher experience quite. It was a lot of parental guidance from what I heard. I don't have kids, so I just heard, but I can understand how difficult it might have been, because take nothing for granted. Like it's no easy task to accomplish the goals of an education system. I tend to disagree with the goal of an education system being for industrial purposes, because what my experience of school was partially like to compete and obey. And that was like the training of the buzzers and the hours and the detention and what they do at school, like the lesson sort of beneath all other lessons, whatever that's to teach you, like long division and stuff, is compete and obey. And I have mixed feelings about all that. So I think after that was my second round of comments.
Thank you. Madam Riba.
Yes, okay. I have a couple of questions that a couple of you, Rob and David and Jason, will pick up. I wanted to get a good synopsis from one of you on who is financing the computing power behind the technology for the metaverse. And then I just want to make a couple of comments about how I think it might be really useful. Kinesthetic training and psychological resilience, which are areas that I think are really important to phase into a technology where, you know, the id, ego, and super ego of a person will interact with a situation. And so I'm particularly interested in how they do segment intending beyond the gaming level of it, where you're an experienced gamer and once you've gone through a game a couple of times, you can figure out how to do a segment ahead of time. So that would be very interesting. And also the psychological resilience, especially for youth like ADHD or different designations with autism, that type of thing. I think there's some therapeutic application that is really valuable, has a lot of potential. And also on the educational one, I want to throw out a question. What about andragogic education and how that would pair up with the metaverse as well too. I think Rob, you'd probably be the best one to answer that one as well. So, and then I have one other comment, and I'll pass it back to Sharif, and that is that the ozone layer with all these satellites going up has just had a peer-reviewed document issued yesterday in the news. I think it was the Washington Post, where there's a very significant concern that the materials that go into making the satellites, like resins and the metals and everything that burn up when they are completely used up in the stratosphere, are damaging the ozone layer. So that's my area with reduction tech. We actually have a contingency plan basically sketched out for ozone layer repair if it's ever needed with our advanced oxidation. So anyway, I'm very interested to hear what you think about the fact that the number of satellites are starting to tax the ozone layer. And with that, Sharif, I'll let you take the chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Rob.
Okay, so address the question. So let's take the first one. Who's paying for the metaverse? Okay, so we begin with a misconception of what the metaverse currently is. There's no one. There's a lot of metaverses, and so each metaverse is funded by whoever's going to benefit from it. So Earth 2, which would be the metaverse that I think people would be the most interested in, since it's a global model of the US, of the world's weather system, and directly relates to climate change. That's the one you want to watch. That's currently being funded by NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is doing Earth 2, and that's the global weather mapping, global warming simulation, against which you would apply things like simulations of your capture technology, your carbon capture technology, to see if that actually would have if you could scale it enough to make a difference, or if you would have to do something else in order to accomplish the underlying goals. But this would allow you to do it in simulation. Years go by like seconds, and you can carry forward a number of decades in a matter of minutes. It's not done yet, but that's where that's funded. Military, every military has a metaverse, I believe, right now. Certainly from the developed countries have a metaverse instance which are training the military, and of course, in the United States, that would be funded by the U.S. military, and likely by the branch that's using it. I expect Navy, Army, and Air Force, and Space Force even would have their own individual simulations that would talk about what it is they're doing. With regard to adult education, clearly the metaverse would be really good with regard to teaching adults. Whether we're talking about kids or adults, people learn at different levels and in using different methodologies. As a child, when your brain is relatively fluid, you can learn things in certain ways, mostly through text and more traditional ways of education. As we get older, we tend to be much more fixed in our thinking, and here it may require us to physically go through the tasks. Though I would argue in both cases, actually experiencing something as you're learning it can be more effective. But I think for an older audience, it's particularly important and kind of showcasing. I was looking at a cartoon this morning about a guy lamenting about, I was young. I look forward to being as wise as my grandfather was, and now I'm a grandfather, and he's sitting in front of the computer, and his 12-year-old showing him how to use it. He says things just didn't work out like I expected. And that's become a problem. Often we find that things are moving so quickly. The older citizens that we have been unable to adapt to some of the stuff, and it's been kind of problematic. Whether it's operating their vehicle or just operating the new appliances in their homes, often we find our older relatives struggling. And here's a case where they could go in to a metaverse instance, and rather than just seeing a video, could ask questions, could be walked through, could try, if they want to try the repair themselves, could try the repair virtually first, and thereby experience what could happen if you break a pipe or whatever in the virtual world before you have water flooding your kitchen and realize that you probably should have called a plumber in the first place. So the metaverse does provide those instances. So you had a couple other questions. What what other ones did you have, David, that I did not address?
The one that I think is really interesting is psychological resilience.
Oh yeah,
And
certainly. Stress testing in particular. A number of I've been through stress interviews, and when you're looking at psychological resilience, or putting in place somebody, you're dealing with a person that's just either living in an adverse environment, working in an adverse environment, or just having a difficult time working through adversity. And a lot of kids coming out of school hit this kind of wall. You can put them in the environment and stress test them, and then remove the stress instantaneously. To talk about what happened and talk about the response to the stress. And you can use generative AI on top of the metaverse, so that you don't necessarily need to have a person observing or interacting with a student. Though I think in the early years it would be wise to do so, because we've already seen generative AI go off the rails a few times as we try to structure the guardrails around it. But eventually you could have a situation where you could have throughout your entire life your own personal psychiatrist, generative AI psychiatrist, which would know your background, would know your path, and wouldn't have the distractions of a human psychiatrist who has their own world and a lot of other clients to deal with. This one could be dedicated to you. So in the end, allowing you to have that kind of oversight that we're probably supposed to get from our parents and didn't, supposed to get from the education system and didn't, and certainly could have gotten from the medical community, but probably didn't. And in the end, have it still be personal, private, and our own underlying experience, which is often a problem when somebody's seeking a psychiatric help, is they're concerned about the stigma of seeing a psychiatrist. And this is something that can be done not only in the privacy of their own home, but be done entirely privately. Nobody would ever have to know that they had somebody over their shoulder. And I think most of us would probably benefit from having that kind of direct coaching throughout our lives. And I think we can all look back to mistakes we've made interpersonally throughout our lives that have been problematic, and this could help us avoid those, or at least understand the implications of our decision before we made them. But stress testing and psychological development would be
so it could be like a big do-it-yourself archive for people that is intelligent, and parenting skills could be included as well too.
Good. If it really depends on how it's implemented. It could be one where the kid, if say the child got pregnant and didn't want to confront their parents, but wanted to talk to something that they knew wasn't going to get back to their parents, their school, their priest, or whatever. An instance could be done this way that could help them make the decisions that they need to make without necessarily involving an adult yet. But that would depend on the laws of the state or the country that they existed in. And of course, these environments would have to take into account local litigation and local laws. And though recognized laws tend to follow technology by a great degree and often get it wrong. So we've got some troubling times ahead, I think, with regard to how this stuff is applied. And that's it. Closing remarks. Metaverse for education could be a huge enhancement. Don't necessarily need 3D glasses. You can implement relatively cheaply with just computer screens if you had to. But it's all about providing a level of in-depth learning that you couldn't get through books or in a classroom, that you would really only get by experiencing things as if you were there. And so it opens up a gamut of capabilities and a breadth of services that could be applied at scale relatively cheaply per student, because it wouldn't have to be labor intensive. To a large extent, it could be automated, and simply you just scale the hardware. And in this case, that metaverse would undoubtedly be created by whoever owned education, which is typically the government. So this would be a government metaverse that would be contained. But nothing says that the government couldn't partner with companies that have their own metaverse instances for training, like Cisco for the Networking Academy, and have students attend those facilities and to supplement whatever they're doing in the education funded instances. So it's just a matter of teaching them the skills and giving them access. And off to David.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Well, one other answer to her question is that we're seeing in the emerging metaverse, a lot of interest put to some of the, not only the psychological side of it, but also to the social emotional learning side of it. Uh, in my holding company, we have one of our portfolio companies called Universal Tutor that is using conversational based 3D avatars to teach social and emotional learning with a lot of psychometric testing, other type of assessments and things too. And one of the real benefits of the metaverse in education is going to be the amount of testing we can do, not just classic academic testing, but things like psychometric testing and others that could help us not only personalize the education process, but alert us early to other challenges the students might be having in both social or pure emotional areas. So that I think is going to be one of the promises as we look at the metaverse. Because if I go back to where we talked about earlier um, and look at the pandemic, according to UNICEF, 91% of the worldwide students were disrupted by the pandemic, and the learning process was really changed. And the technology was critical during that time, and it struggled greatly during that first year. And so we've seen things like how much we have to change the curriculum to work in this digital world. And the metaverse has the potential to make the whole world a classroom with data bits and other things embedded all over the world. So think of the old Pokemon games, but now apply it into an education environment. And like I said, gamification is going to be really there. The other thing I think is going to be real interesting is the metaverse is going to promote interdisciplinary learning, and it's going to promote more collaborative learning, which I think is very important for when we see where the future of education go. And finally, there was a study I saw recently of a study from China, which showed that the use of VR in the classroom has a very positive result on exam results. And they even compared an average C student using virtual reality could outperform an A student in tests after VM helped them study. So a lot of interesting opportunities like that. And I want us to realize and remember that when we talk about metaverse and education, it's not classic just K through 12 or higher education. It also includes training. It includes refreshing skills. It is going to be skills that help us transition to new career paths in a short period of time. So it also will help us implement education on demand, and education on demand is going to be very important as we begin to see uh, the number of jobs the average citizen has increased dramatically as our life expectancy increases. And as I said before, the metaverse is going to help us refine even more the concept of lifelong learning. So, Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of this today.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that I would like to just add that it's possible to even evaluate the class and curriculum in that setting. I remember hearing a story about how holding the attention of the class is the job of the instructor, and that ensuring the class understands the content is the job of the instructor, and that the extent to which the class gains understanding is how you measure the success of the instructor. I mean, mutually speaking, that's how you measure the success of the student. And there's a relationship to explore with that. And I think that lends itself to just something interesting within as you mentioned. I mean, it's true, there are, right? You log into a thing, and that's if it has its endpoints, its own contained simulation, then there will be many of them. You know, I think back to school. I think that some of the things I look forward to the most were always the field trips, and I think about how education can really prepare people for real life and for success by having this sort of open opportunity to do this field trip, to go and learn within a full immersion experience, with the added abstract, right? The purpose of the abstract is invisible. You know, you don't just go out to wherever. Say it's the one example was offered up about walking through a helicopter engine, I think it was, or something. You don't just look at an engine and know what all the things are, right? There are a lot of abstracts that you can't see. It really is a non-comparable difference. It's a non-linear difference compared to looking at a paper page to get that information out, and looking through a glass where the information is right there, happening quicker. The scarcity of time is a big thing to save on. And I'd redouble that education in the first place is a luxury proper. A lot of people don't know how to solve problems, and they're stuck, and they don't have time to learn how to solve problems even quite. They just sort of scrabble against it. And it's a long pathway for a culture to sort of institutionally mature in terms of what it's teaching and how, and what the standards are, what is a graduate, what is certificate, what is, to the point of standards, right? And to the point of agreeable standards. I think that universities and even some other types of school place a bit of gatekeeper power. They might exercise a bit too much gatekeeper power on being the ones who recognize credentials, who recognize people's competencies and capacities, and that there are so many ways for a person to prove that they understand the material. There's so many ways for a person to prove that they have a given capacity or a given competency. And, you know, like, education is priced away from many people because it's expensive to get an acknowledgement from a proper institution that says, you know, that the institution is willing to acknowledge your competency for a thing. And I really would invite enthusiastic field of competition to provide that opportunity for people to prove that they have understanding of the content, you know, all those things. And we'll set a good standard for it, right? A standard that we can know in a trusted way. It's a dependable standard. If a person knows a thing, if they know the answer, they know the answer. Doesn't matter whether Harvard knows that they know the answer or not, does it? Thank you for the opportunity again. It's a pleasure speaking with you all. And I'll leave that as my last comment for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam.
Jason, I just want to pick up on what you said about the universities, because one of my thoughts is, you know, universities experience quite a silo effect with their gatekeeper power. And I think that this is going to actually deconstruct quite a lot of what they have in that area, but it can be a positive thing rather than a negative thing. And so I'm hoping that academia will you know, understand that we want them to embrace something like this. Also, the other area that I think is very interesting is bringing textbook knowledge to life with 3D computer-aided drafting while you're in the metaverse is a very interesting area as well. So you could learn about basic acceleration principles with a 3D computer-aided tutorial that's, you know, really brings it to life for you rather than just having a flat 2D diagram on the page. So that follows on what I'm saying about the university teaching knowledge. And I think there's a lot of potential, and the agreed upon standards are going to be multiple parameter standards. And I guess we'll probably have to figure out what all of those are. And then we can use that as a framework to actually, firm it up and make it something that we all agree on. So with that, Sharif, I'll let you have the chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an excellent session. Especially, we can learn a lot about metaverse in education. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Thank you, Mr. Jason. And thank you, Madam Viva. Specifically from World Talent Economy Forum, I want to share that we are collaborate with Reduction Tech, because countries like Bangladesh, Maldives, India, Indonesia, were heavily suffer for climate change. We are supporting different remote area of emerging economy, and you see that the emerging economy heavily affected by climate change. So this technology, this innovation, extremely important for us. We just finished our very big event with Dhaka University, where we discuss with the government agency, corporation, and academy. We believe that this kind of innovations and technology, as well as collaborations, can uplift our community and can help country like Bangladesh. So I want to request all of the investors, all of the academic communities, government agencies, and corporations. We need more support for reduction tax, and hopefully it will be helpful for the global community. Second things, this coming July, we have one of the largest projects, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. And in this Nikola Tesla Technology Conference, all of the important government agencies like Prime Minister Office, like in Energy Ministry, Education Ministry, Industry Ministry, largest corporation from Asia Pacific, different big university, those who have minimum 40,000 students, everyone collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum for this Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. I want to invite you all in Bangladesh for this conference. Hopefully it will be very, very interesting conference. Those who have innovations, you can come and join with us. Different impact investors from around the world, they will join. Different corporations from around the world, they will join. So it will be one of the largest opportunity for the global community. Besides that, I request Sport TV, we need more viewers, more support. Your support will be very helpful for us. And I just want to share in this grassroots level with 5 cities, we collaborate with 10 million people. So hopefully we can uplift our community, and we need all of your support. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.